Okay, welcome everyone to Black Men Speak. I'm your co-host, VJR Stewart.
And I'm your co-host, D. Tommy D. Duncan III, otherwise known as TD3. Jimmy, it is Wednesday, February the 22nd, 2023, Jimmy. And if it's Wednesday night,
It's Black Men Speak. So let's go give a big shout out to Liquid for providing our theme music. And if you haven't already, please hit that like button. Help our numbers. Subscribe if you haven't already. And please help spread the words. So share the news about our show.
and in addition to that, Jimmy, our chat line is open and so is our call-in line. So do feel free to call in and either one, give us your comments or ask questions, or of course, shoot us a couple of notes on the chat line. Let us know what your thoughts are about tonight's show and or anything that we're talking about this evening.
Yes. So, Tom, another interesting week. I believe we had some news from last week that we kind of missed. I think it came in after our show.
Yes.
So why don't we go back and bring people up to date on the shooting in New York, and then we'll proceed with the rest of the show.
Yeah, so as everyone knows, I guess, Jimmy, it's been a little while since we've covered this topic. But of course, the tragic shooting in Buffalo, New York, as most of you should probably know by now, the young man, I believe he was 18 years old, who shot and killed 10 people who were just doing grocery shopping at a Tops local food market, Jimmy. He was convicted of murder and got, I believe, life without parole.
Yeah, Thomas, the sentence is too light for me. When you get into multiple murders like that for no reason, it wasn't like this was a crime of passion. You caught your wife cheating or something, or someone had stolen money from you or something. Tom, this is just he just goes into finds a store, scopes it out for a couple of days, comes back and shoots the place up. A person like that, Tom, doesn't deserve to live.
Well, Jimmy, he had a reason to do it, unfortunately, Jimmy, and
What was the reason?
he didn't, his hatred of black people. I mean, when you look at what they found in terms of his social media and some of the things that he said, I mean, it was a hate crime. And obviously,
Okay.
hate crimes do have consequences. And folks who were literally just going about their doing what people do, grocery shop, taking care of their families. This guy drives, what was it, 3 or 4 hours?
Yes.
3 or 4 hours to shoot up a grocery store of law-abiding citizens just because they were black.
Well, Tom, once again, I mean, I know those are mitigating circumstances, but it's not enough for me to reduce his sentence to life without parole. Still, this is a very heinous crime. Those people did nothing to him. I can see you having some hatred against black people. I'm not sure what black people had done to him other than just being black. But since nobody had wounded you in any kind of way, violated you in any kind of way, damaged you in any kind of way, those people deserve the better sentence in that time. I wish maybe he had been convicted here in Texas, and maybe he would have been put on death row if he was convicted here in Texas.
Yeah, Jimmy. And I mean, the sad part about it is that the victims in this case, not that, the age is immaterial. I mean, whether they're children, we've talked about Uvalde,
Right.
but all of the victims here were between the ages of, at the youngest, 32, at the oldest, Jimmy, 86 years old. We're talking about senior citizens here, Jimmy. And I remember seeing the video. And what really enraged me at the time, Jimmy, is that as he was shooting people, killing, murdering people, American citizens, when he came across a person who happened to be white, he said, "Excuse me, sorry about that," and went and kept shooting other people.
Yeah, that's what makes this so heinous, Tom. And so I'm not sure what the prosecutor and the folks in the jury in New York were thinking. But if I was on that jury pool, there's no way I would have gone along with life in prison with no parole. I don't know if the prosecutor even asked for the death penalty, but if they had, that's what I would have been voting for.
Yeah. And so, I mean, in this case, Jimmy, I guess it kind of depends on what your politics are in this situation, but it was a tragic situation. You can never get, your family members back, your loved ones
Right.
back. And I find it very interesting. I was reading in the article at the time is that he, apologized to the families of the victims. Someone lunged at him, tried to jump on him. And I mean, you can't begin to imagine the type of heartache and pain that the family
True.
went through in a situation like this. And, you know, it's too much, too little, too late. And I guess the scary thing about this is one incident, but we know as much as this young man, 18 years of age, who was radicalized by some group to do something like this. He drove again 3 to 4 hours out of the way to do this after being radicalized by white supremacist groups to hurt somebody who did nothing to him other than to be black. And the question is, what do you do to prevent this type of thing? I mean, obviously, the focus of our show tonight is not legislation as it pertains to gun control, but I believe that the articles or the research showed that he got this assault style weapon not too long after his 18th birthday, and that was it. You called it a wrap. Obviously, we have a lot of issues with mental health in this country. Obviously, we have a proliferation of very dangerous guns. Nothing wrong with having Second Amendment rights to protect your household and your family, but to go and attack other people, that's a different thing.
Well, Tom, some of the most heinous killings always take place in the cities with the most strictest gun laws. So there have been several stories here in the news recently, here in Texas, where restaurants were being involved and people were being involved who had a handgun of their own and responded by shooting the perpetrators. So I'm not sure if that's the answer, but it certainly seemed to work in some cases, especially in states like Texas that have open carry and concealed carry laws in the books. And you never know in Texas when you go to commit a crime who's packing and who's not. So.
And Jimmy, I mean, I don't. We didn't spend a lot of time on it. If we discussed it at all, obviously there's the Michigan State situation that we had here recently.
Yes.
Obviously, we talked about the catastrophe at the Uvalde School in South Texas.
Correct.
I don't know when and where it ends, Jimmy, but you have innocent people, from little kids in grammar school to senior citizens in grocery stores. And the question is, what do you do to reduce this? There's a culture of violence in this country that unfortunately has a destructive purpose in a lot of folks, and we don't know how to disagree without being disagreeable. But this wasn't a situation, Jimmy, to your point, where somebody is responding to something that they went through. He just went and killed people because he hated them.
Right, Tom. And in a situation like this, you need someone who's willing to put this person down as quickly as possible before they can inflict damage on other people. So that would be my answer. We are a warrior nation. Since our inception, our beginning in 1776 with our Declaration of Independence, Tom, our nation has been at war more than any other nation in the world. So let's not forget our nature, how we started, what this country is about. We are a warrior nation, and we have angry people here. So with that being said, when you have dangerous people out of control, killing discriminately, I'm not going to say indiscriminately, killing discriminately just based on color, then someone needs to put that person down as quickly as possible before they actually get to body number 8, 9, or 10. So if someone that put him down after he shot 1 or 2 people, there'll be maybe 8 people still alive today who could say that they were not victims.
Right. And I guess, in a lot of these cases, Jimmy, especially, of course, we talk about the many mass shootings. Again, it's access to assault style, military style weapons to some degree or another. Even if you're talking about a handgun or something of that nature, you're hopefully talking about less incidents, especially less deaths. But there's got to be a stop and an end to this, Jimmy. But we just wanted to make sure that we covered that.
Putting them down is a stop.
I know.
Because criminals are not going to obey the law. So you can pass as many laws as you want about handgun restriction, about stocks, about how many bullets you can chamber, put into a jacket. the criminals are not going to follow it. They're going to break the. That's why they're
Correct.
criminals. They're always going to break the law. So the only weapon that we have, the innocent public, against these criminals, and notice that most of the time, Tom, these guys are cowards. As soon as you start shooting back, they clam up. They're not trying to go through a shootout themselves. They'll clam up, run off, and then kill themselves sometimes. So they're okay with shooting people, but they don't want fire returned to them. So the best way to save lives is somebody needs to return fire. The quicker and the sooner, the better. And I don't have a problem with wounding this person and then someone finishing them off to save us the cost of a trial and incarceration.
Yeah, Jimmy, you can't disagree with you in principle. However, the challenge is this: when you talk about going to church, when you think about going to a grocery store or being in a school, you're gonna have security, and obviously there's been increased security in places that used to be safe, but now, Jimmy, you just never know what direction they're coming in, and so I think beginning to limit access and putting more restrictions on guns that have magazines of bullets that, again, are assault style. There has to be an answer, because most of these mass shootings are coming at the hands of criminals with assault style weapons.
Right,
And
Tom,
an 18-year-old who has no military background training or discipline, there needs to be some restriction on
every
those.
weapon is an assault weapon, Tom.
You're correct.
There's
You're
no
correct.
benign weapon out there. Every weapon is an assault weapon, be it a knife or a stick or a club
But
or a
there's a difference.
handgun.
But there is a difference between an AR-15 and a 9mm in terms of your
They both
capacity to
kill.
do that.
They both have
You're correct.
the capacity to kill.
But the speed at which you're able to do that is the difference.
Well, it's a semi-automatic, Tom. As fast as you can pull the trigger, it's as fast as you get the bullet off. And once again, putting that person down as quickly as somebody can is the answer, because the criminals are always going to get the weapons, and all you're going to do is restrict law-abiding citizens from being able to defend themselves. And once again, Chicago, New York, San Francisco, California, all these places, Oregon, Portland, all these places that have really strict gun control laws, some of the toughest in the country, have the highest murder rates. And so the answer is not putting more restrictions on legal, law-abiding citizens.
No, not on law-abiding citizens, but in terms of access to the most dangerous guns, where you can do the most damage in the shortest period of time, and then having access to folks who, quite frankly, might have mental issues, don't have any military background training or discipline, or are young and obviously emotional and have not matured to a degree where they truly understand the impact and the repercussions of what they're doing.
Well, Tom, until they commit a crime, they're all law-abiding citizens. This kid was a law-abiding citizen until he did what he did. So
an 18-year-old law-abiding citizen.
Yeah. So which is that person's an adult at that point, deemed the age of majority is 18. They have the right to vote, buy a gun. So it's like I said, I know we're well intentioned with the restrictions that we want to place, but it would be very discriminatory. Yes, it'd be very discriminatory to say 18s can't buy guns. Then what? They just wait till they're 19.
Certain types of guns, and making it more difficult, especially for someone at that age, to get that type of a weapon of mass destruction.
Well, tell me, even if we stop making AR-15 today, there'll be an AR-16 tomorrow. There'll be a super modified handgun. Because really, if you take the long barrel and the stock off an AR-15, then there's a version of the AR-15 that reduces down to a handgun. And so the Biden administration has now labeled that gun as restrictive. They try to say it's a rifle when you could take the stock and it becomes a handgun at that point. So I'm not sure all these restrictions that we're looking to place is really going to help. But these are feel-good measures. But once again, I take my chances with someone who's been to the rifle range or the firing range, who knows how to use their gun. And if they see someone shooting up the place, they pull their gun out and be willing to take that person out. I say even go for the head. Head first.
Gotcha, Jimmy.
Don't take any chances shooting them in the leg or the arm.
Gotcha. Well, why don't we do this, Jimmy?
Let's move on.
There we go. Let's go. And that's a conversation for another day. Let's go
Yeah.
to our next story, which is, Jimmy, I think a very interesting story, historical spotlight. Many folks are very aware of the Little Rock Nine, of course, which started the mass desegregation or the desegregation of our schools in America. But there is a less told story in New Orleans for the desegregation of public schools in New Orleans, and they are known as the New Orleans Four. So in 1960, based upon court order, there were four young girls who desegregated two elementary schools, November the 14th of 1960. Ruby Bridges, who was the first to desegregate William France Elementary School, Leona Tate, Tessie Prevost, and Gail Etienne, who desegregated McDonald 19 Elementary School, also in New Orleans. And Jimmy, this is a very intriguing story to me. There have been some exposés and interviews with all of these heroes, very courageous heroes, who just at the tender age of, I believe, 6 years old, had to deal with white, angry mobs who were trying to prevent them from what? Getting an education in what is supposed to be a free country in America, Jimmy. And, they are all still living to tell their story. And there is a bright spot to this as well, Jimmy, but a very intriguing story that if you've not heard of the New Orleans Four, do your research, Google it, search it, find out a little bit more what happened with these young women and what they went through in order to help really turn the corner or help turn the corner for access to a quality education for everyone in this country. Jimmy, what I think we have a couple of videos, Jimmy.
We have 3 clips, Tom, that we're going to share with the public. Let's put our disclaimer out that this is not our original content. So we're using these clips on the Fair Use Act, and all the rights are reserved for the content owner. So we're just going to put that out. Let's put a ticker out there to play with the video, Tom.
Okay.
All right, here's the first clip.
How the police had set it up. There were policemen everywhere. I remember being escorted straight to the principal's office. I guess I was there to be escorted to my classroom, possibly meet my teacher, and to get started with my studies. But I sat in the principal's office actually all day with my mom that day, and I remember the federal marshals standing right outside the doors. You could see them. There were glass windows. And the next thing that I saw was all of those people that had been standing outside rushing in.
And so
Tom,
Jimmy,
that is
Miss Ruby Bridges.
Yes, in the video, did you see how young she was, how small she was being escorted in? I'm still thinking that maybe, just maybe, this would be too young of an age for children of that age to be put on the front line like that. But I'm glad she was able to survive it all, was not harmed, and live to tell the story. So yes, she and the other 3 are definitely American heroes.
And so Ruby Bridges, by herself, obviously with escorts from the Marshal Services and, with the support of her parents as well, desegregated William France Elementary School on November the 14th, 1960. Jimmy, not with a group, but by herself, one lone 6-year-old young girl that literally had to face a white mob of angry
Very
parents.
angry. They look very angry to me, Tom.
And imagine being a 6-year-old, Jimmy. I don't care how courageous you are, having to deal with a mob of adults who are expressing all types of expletives, calling you all types of names, which we won't mention here, saying all types of things that no young kid should be exposed to out of sheer hatred, out of sheer anger for the fact that she's now going to their school and they don't want any black children in their school, Jimmy.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
So let's play the next clip, Tom, and hear a little bit more of her story.
Okay.
Really busy and confusing to me. And I saw them pass the window, and when they would come back by the window, there were kids with them. And that happened all day long, back and forth. Finally the bell rang, it was 3 o'clock, and I remember someone entering the room and saying, "School is dismissed, you can leave." And I distinctly remember that because I thought to myself, wow, this school is easy. Not knowing that what was really happening is that parents rushed into the school and went into every classroom and pulled out every child.
Yes. Tom, I think that says a lot about the people of New Orleans. This is not to denigrate them in any kind of way, but I mean, let's face it. I'm not sure if those attitudes have changed much over the years, because the public school system in New Orleans and a few other cities is very segregated even today. Those John McDonald schools, the McDonald 19 and 69, all those McDonald schools over New Orleans are majority black. Most of the white kids go to private schools.
And I know, Jimmy, you spent some time there, of course, during college,
Yeah.
so you know a little bit more about some of the politics and the dynamics of what is there now or what was there at that time. Jimmy, I think they said within like a year of that school went from predominantly white to predominantly black.
As they were pulling, as she witnessed parents coming in, like she said, all day long, she knows parents coming in and parents and kids going out. So that process continued, Tom, until all the white students were out of school and placed in a private school. There's a proliferation of private schools in New Orleans, Catholic schools especially. So I'm not sure very much has changed, except the public schools went from pretty much all white to predominantly black.
Exactly. And then again, if we look at this in 1960, or if we compare that to even the 21st century, we're talking about a classic example of white flight. Whether you're talking about the desegregation of a school, or you're looking at white flight from neighborhoods when African-American families move in. Jimmy, we've seen this historically over the years, even during, of course, our time, as young people and or as early adults, we see the same thing.
But Tom, there have been several studies on this, and they all come up with showing the same results, that when a neighborhood goes from, when it reaches the 11% black point, almost to the house, white flight pretty much kicks in. And so long as you stay under 11%, generally you can keep a predominantly white neighborhood, but when you start going past that, white flight generally kicks in. So, but this is exactly what happened with the schools in New Orleans and several other cities, that the white public schools became black public schools.
Yeah, absolutely, Jimmy. And so, Jimmy, this is a situation where, and we're going to talk a little bit more about this, is the value and the impact of education on our society. One thing that a lot of people aren't aware of, beyond the scope of this story or this conversation, is that there are children in third world countries across the world that don't have access to free education. There are some countries, Jimmy, that you are aware of, that you and I both know of. Young girls can't get an education.
Right.
Or children don't have a free public education. They have to pay for their books, pay for getting access to schools. And we're not talking about pristine private schools. We're talking about
public schools, right? Basic education.
Exactly. And so these were families who were sending their children to schools to get a quality education after, of course, Brown v. Board of Education and the backlash as a result of that, Jimmy. So let's get to the other video.
Let's get to the last clip, and then we can finish up the conversation.
The second day, once I returned, I remember being escorted into the building, and the building seemed very different. It was so quiet. You could hear a pin drop. There was no one moving around. I didn't hear any kids. But I remember getting to the top of the stairs and someone saying, "Your class is down the hall." And the federal marshals turning me around and walked me down the hall to this classroom. And once I got there, the door opened and this woman stepped out. And she said, "Hi, my name is Mrs. Henry. I'm your teacher."
And the story goes on to say, Jimmy, that she was a class of one in
Tom,
William. Yes,
one day. We're not talking about over a semester. We're not talking about a school year for them to empty that school out. In one day, that school was emptied out.
correct. You are correct, Jimmy. That all of the parents pulled all their kids out of the school, and further into the documentary, it shows or it indicated that there were some kids who were being taught, white kids who were being taught in other classrooms, but they separated her into that
Hmm.
classroom because the parents did not want her in the same classroom as their children. And so they were actually having a class with other kids in other schools. And she didn't understand one, while she was in the school by herself, because not only are you there to get an education, but you're also there to make friends. And as a 6-year-old,
Right.
you cannot process the anger and the vitriol of parents, because no kid is born with this type of hatred, this type of anger.
Sure, this is taught.
And understand that this was a different time in this country, but also it is the same time that we are in right now to a certain degree. But a 6-year-old cannot begin to process why she can't be in a school or a classroom with other children, and or why she's not able to make friends with other kids at her age.
Well, Tom, the other thing is
She didn't
we're
see,
not
bottom line is she didn't see black and white. She just saw
right.
kids.
And so we're not sharing this story, Tom, to invoke any kind of hatred or hurt feelings. Um, this is to say that there are a lot of people who paved the way for where we are today that need to be honored and recognized. But also, Tom, our kids need to understand the sacrifice. Don't dismiss education as nothing, because there's so many people that have to fight for you to have a right to vote, a right to get an education. And now that you have some of those doors are opening up for you. Don't squander it. Don't show disrespect to your elders and to those who came before you by not putting your best foot forward and saying, "Hey, I'm going to go into the school, learn as much as possible because someone had to pay the price for me to be here. So I'm going to make sure I honor their memory by going in here and doing my absolute best and getting the most I can from this opportunity."
Right. And so for those of you who want to see a little bit more on this particular video, um, you'll want to go to YouTube, which is where we found this, and search on Freedom's Legacy, which tells a little bit more about the story of Ruby Bridges and her story when she desegregated the school. Another one, the other three girls, now women, search on Desegregation Come Full Circle, which tells the story of Leona Tate, Tessie Prevost, and Gail Atienne. And they sit together because they went to the other school, McDonough
Daughter
19.
19.
Exactly,
Yes.
Madonna 19 elementary school, and they talk about their story. And there's a heart-wrenching segment when one of them reveals that when she was again 6 years old, they're by themselves. They did not have the marshal service protecting them. It was just
Mm.
them three as three children, and so they went through. I can't say any other way. They went through all types of violence. One of the girls was hit in the stomach with a baseball bat.
Mm.
Um, some of them, they spat on them. They called them the N word. They ripped their clothes up. They kicked at them. And Jimmy, I mean, this isn't coming from the parents from the kids other than through the parents, unfortunately. Kids can't think of treating other kids like this. Unfortunately, it's the parents
Right.
that influence these kids to behave and or to think this way. 2 years they were there, and then they desegregated. There is a difference. They desegregated, I believe it was TJ Sims elementary school a couple of years later. And then they went on to a junior high school where there were 20 other students who joined them in the desegregation of those schools. Now, we fast forward 60 some odd years later, there's actually a foundation that was established in the name of these three young ladies called Tate, Atienne, and Prevost Interpretive Center. And what they've done that school now that they were in, Jimmy, was closed during COVID, and it was basically sitting there rotting away. And Miss Tate, who was one of the New Orleans Four,
Hmm.
worked with city council and the mayor and other grassroots leaders, and they have now purchased that building, that school building that they were in 1960, and went through all of that. And they have basically reprogrammed that with generous donations from other folks in the community and with support from their council people. On the second and third floor of that school now, there are apartments that are set up for low income residents, and the first floor of that is now a museum that is dedicated to preserving the history of
Okay.
what happened in that school. So um, I would highly represent, because I know that New Orleans is a very, very major tourist destination in the United States. So
Yes,
it's
definitely go
called,
support it.
exactly, it's called the New Orleans Four Legacy Project. You can search on that to get more information. So do look that up and take some time to go visit and support these sisters and what they are doing, giving them their flowers while they are still living, and supporting what they're doing and helping to revitalize and to cherish the history. Through heartache and pain, Jimmy, there is now something positive coming out of that.
Well, that's a good thing, Tom. And once again, we have to recognize the sacrifice that ancestors and those who came before us have made. Don't let their sacrifice go in vain. Is all I can say. So the people there, I mean, anyone who's watching this video, and certainly Black kids across the country, we all have a duty to those who came before us. So, and that duty is we put our best foot forward, do the absolute, become the best people that we can absolutely become. Because by doing so, then you're now paying it forward, hopefully encouraging someone else to do the same.
And before we move forward, Jimmy, we want to welcome a few folks who have joined us on the chat
What do we
line.
have?
Yes, Miss Bosie Scott. We want to thank you for joining us. She is one of our regular visitors.
Yes, she
And
is.
Miss Carol Wilson, and of course, Brother Dwight Johnson, who has been on our show a couple of times. So we want to thank all three of you for joining us this evening. Feel free to share your comments and your thoughts. Ms. Bosie says Bastrop High School, this is a small rural town in Bastrop, Louisiana, is basically segregated. It's about 99% Black, and a charter school educating their white counterparts. Ms. Carol Wilson, going back to our prior story, the guns most used in crimes are various types of handguns, of course. And thank you for joining us, Brother Johnson. And we will go ahead and move on to our next story, Jimmy. But again, do please, when you go to New Orleans, because I know practically everybody, if you're going someplace for good fanfare to go to, of course, the French Quarter and do all that kind of stuff, go to places like this that really matter and that are making
It
a
really matters, yes.
Next, we want to talk briefly about a business spotlight. There is a company, a Texas-owned company, that is a Black women-owned company that just topped $10 million in VC funding, Jimmy. And I wanted to give a little shine and some highlight to
Two
this.
Black women founded the
Exactly.
company. I believe they are, last time I saw numbers on their revenue, about a $4 million a year. With about 30 employees. So they have grown from a two-person shop to over 30 employees.
And so this is the types of things, Jimmy. With everything else that's going on, Jimmy, we want to highlight when we have entrepreneurs and sisters in particular within the community who are doing great things, who are growing, who are making a difference. Canaris, Kanarys, I believe within the last week, this month, they raised another round of $5 million,
Yes.
led by Cyan, SEYEN Capital, and ramping their total to date of a little bit over $10 million, Jimmy. And so, again, Black women are the fastest growing demographic of entrepreneurs in
And
this
most
country.
successful, yes.
Exactly.
Fastest growing and most successful group in America.
Exactly. I believe that if I read it correctly, they are one of 30 Black woman-owned businesses that have gotten at least $10 million in funding.
That's correct. And Tom, that also goes to show that, we hear this complaint that we don't have access to capital, but money follows money. So if you're making money, if you have a business that's making money, then it's a lot easier to attract capital than for those who want to invest in your business and grow their investment. But if your business is not making money, then yes, that's going to be a very hard sell to get people to invest when you don't have a balance sheet and no revenue coming in.
Yep, actually, and I want to give a shout out also to Ms. Bosie Scott, because she is an entrepreneur. She owns a trucking and logistics business and has been growing that as well. And so we want to highlight, our entrepreneurs, our Black business owners, whether they be men or women, give them some shine. We are the only ones, Jimmy, who can be responsible ultimately for growing our economics in our Black business community.
But we need our Black men to step up to the plate also. The Black women just can't be out there by themselves,
Correct,
leading the charge. There need to be some Black men to step their game up also and do the same. So, and part of that time, I think we need to stop, creating a victim mentality among our people. And I'm not saying that life is easy for us or it's the same as it is for other groups, but it's not impossible. And some of our Black women are showing that it's not impossible. So we need to take inspiration from what they're doing and get our act together and go out there and stand hand in hand with a lot of them on the front line as we lead the charge.
I would agree with you on that, Jimmy. But we've got to do it together. There's no other way that we can do it. We can't be fighting against each other or pointing the finger at each other, Jimmy. So we have got to make sure that we are growing it together in partnership with the business community. And for those of you out there who have not done so, watching tonight and our efforts, hit that like button, share this information, and or subscribe if you have not already done so.
Definitely subscribe, yes.
Absolutely. So make sure you hit that like button right now.
And if you're here tonight watching the show, invite a guest with you next week. So just bring one additional person with you, and it'll certainly help our numbers.
Yep. And we also want to thank our good brother Asar Al-Kabilan, who joins us almost religiously when he's not out of town or doing something else on business. Pretty much every week we want to thank brother Asar Al-Kabilan as well out of the Austin area. Thank you for joining us and thank you for supporting us, brother. We're going to have you on our show pretty soon to kind of talk about some of the things that you've been focusing on, because you're doing some pretty cool stuff as well, Jimmy. So let's go ahead and go to our next story, as we are about 20 minutes until the top of the hour. I read an article that I wanted to kind of put out there, Jimmy. Africa, or the complement, or I guess what is synonymous with the Center for Disease Control, except on the African continent, now has coordinating and will be receiving vaccines for what they call the MPox, and what most folks probably know as the monkeypox vaccine.
Tom, I'm a little skeptical here. Maybe it's the conspiracy theory gene kicking in, but I will be a little suspicious of receiving a vaccine from the U.S. With the way things went with COVID. I'm not saying that there is anything nefarious going on, but I would definitely test on a very small group or sample to start with before I roll this out in mass numbers.
Given the Western countries' history on the African continent, I cannot disagree with you at all on that. We understand what the pharmaceutical industry has done to hundreds of thousands of people in terms of, unfortunately, using them as lab experiments for experimental drugs.
Tom, they've been experimenting on Africans for a while. I mean,
Exactly.
when they couldn't no longer experiment on Black people here in America without being exposed and revealed, they simply took the show on the road and moved it to Africa, where to this day a lot of drugs and vaccines are experimented on people, but there's no oversight. There's no one checking on the results. So, like I said, if I was them, I'd be very cautious about accepting a vaccine at this stage. And if you're going to test on a very small sample to make sure of the efficacy of the vaccine, make sure that it works first.
Right. And it is the Africa Centers for Disease Control and Prevention is what I was referring to earlier. I think the countries that are most hardest hit are Congo and Nigeria, and so they're expecting to get these vaccines within the next couple of weeks. But what was happening is you had the first world, so-called first world countries, or the largest industrialized countries that were hoarding the majority of these vaccines. And unfortunately, a lot of the countries, that were needing them on the African continent, possibly other countries as well, smaller third world countries, were not getting access to those vaccines. I would tend to agree with you that you need to be very careful in terms of what you are getting, because given the history of the Western world and how it deals with third world countries, it can be a little bit tricky. But, at the end of the day, you're trying to save your people as well.
Sure.
So we want to make sure that people are aware of that, Jimmy. And then next, we will talk a little bit about an ongoing story or an ongoing narrative that we've been talking about in the sports industry. Of course, the NFL, we talked about the Super Bowl not too long ago. And as a part of that, we also talked about the dearth of black head coaches in the NFL. Well, the 2023 head coaching hiring cycle is now over with, Jimmy, and there is a whopping one black head coach that was hired out of 5 vacancies with the Arizona Cardinals, the Indianapolis Colts, the Denver Broncos, the Carolina Panthers, and then the Houston Texans. And of course, everybody knows that we did report this, that DeMarco Ryans, who is the former defensive coordinator of the San Francisco 49ers, was hired as the head coach of the Houston Texans. Of course, we are wishing him the best of luck and success with that team. And I don't think that there's any place to go but up for the Houston Texans.
Yeah, Tom, and he better do it quickly, because he has about a 2-year window. Now, I hate to say this, but that's probably the window of opportunity for a black head coach. You're not going to get 7, 8 years that some of these other coaches who do a horrible job get. So, and I'm surprised. And really, 2 years is a stretch. But in this case, he's going to get 2 years because they're so pitiful. You got to give him at least 1 year to get a draft on his belt. And then that second year, they better have a winning record of very close to 8-8.
Gotcha. Before we move any further, I do want to acknowledge a couple more guests that we have, Mackie Samuels and Audrey Booker. There's a question related to our prior conversation. There's a question from Mackie Samuels. Are there any financial groups that are dedicated to investing in the establishment and success of black male-owned businesses, similar to the $10 billion invested in BW, I presume it's black women, by investment by Goldman Sachs?
No, Tom, and here's some economic facts. I just got these numbers yesterday, actually. Black folks in America spend $2 billion a year on Air Jordan tennis shoes. Not tennis shoes in general, Air Jordan tennis shoes.
Wait, back up. Repeat that again, Jimmy.
$2 billion a year.
Billion with a B.
$2 billion with a B in that one brand of tennis shoes. So, Tom, our focus is all wrong and jacked up here. So that investment fund that Mackie is talking about, Tom, that could be the tennis shoe money you're giving your kids, $400 and $500 to go out and buy tennis shoes, to be put into a fund. So I don't want to hear that we don't have money to do this. I've been saying this for years. We have money for the stuff that we want to do, and then we go big for the money that we need.
And we're talking about $2 billion on one specific brand of sneaker shoe.
Yes.
One specific type of shoe.
So with the $1.6 trillion that we're projected to spend this year, we can certainly peel some of that money off, Tom, and put into an investment fund to rebuild our cities, to rebuild our inner cities, and for economic development. And for anybody out there that says that we can't do this, I submit that we just track our spending habits. I believe it was, who was the brother that we had on last year? Dr. Umar Johnson?
Yes.
Okay, I saw a video with him recently where he points out that the largest group of Mercedes-Benz automobiles are black people in America now. Now, I guess there's some truth to that because the wife and I own two of them, but we bought them because we were looking for quality cars. But it looks like collectively as a group, Tom, we have spending power, we have money. Just that we're big time consumers. We like to spend rather than pool our money together and invest. But we need to change that mindset and start looking to put these kind of funds together to spur on economic development.
Yeah, that's a very interesting point, Jimmy. We have another thought here by Mr. Mackey Samuels. Do you believe that Alpha Phi Alpha fraternity member, billionaire Robert Smith, CEO of Vista Equity Partners, might develop a fund to invest in black male-owned businesses? That is a very good question. I mean, he is one of a handful of billionaires. How many billionaires do we have now just across the board, Jimmy, in just the U.S., not the world? Is that about 12 or 10 or 12?
I believe so, yes.
About 10 or 12. And, it was just a few years ago that he paid for the
loan debt of graduating class, yes.
Of Morehouse. And so it is not beyond the realm of possibility that something like that could possibly happen. I know, Jimmy, you and I have had this conversation over and over again about, what some of our high net worth individuals, just a handful in our community can or is possibly doing, but understand that the grassroots is the grassroots, and that's really where the rubber meets the road. And on that point, Jimmy, I don't know if you saw this, and we do want to apologize going backwards on this, but we want to make sure that we bring some context to this. I don't know if you read this, but Tyler Perry, I believe, just donated a couple of million, I think it was 2.75 million, to help senior citizens in the Atlanta area pay their back taxes and or help get them caught up so they wouldn't lose their homes as well. And this is pretty recent.
Yeah, Tom, in all those efforts, I'm not going to downplay them because I'm very generous for these people to do this. But rather than pay off your student loan debt, I think would be much more of a benefit to Morehouse or any other university if you had given the money and put it into the endowment fund, and then hopefully that money could be invested. The interest for that money or the dividends from those investments could then go on to help college kids offset their tuition, help the school operate for forever.
Correct.
So paying off a student loan debt, that's a one-time hit versus take those millions that you spent and put them into the school's endowment fund. Hopefully they invested wisely, and that's money that they can receive for years to come. And Tom, overall, I mean, we need to become more savvy investors. I know a lot of young people are starting to get into the stock market, get into investments. A big shout out to my daughter who's trying to become a mogul investor herself. But she's trying. But investing back in our schools that gave us an education or an opportunity to get a good education, investing back in our communities, putting the funds together and pooling our resources. And to answer the Mackey's question, I don't expect the black millionaire class, multimillionaire class, or the black billionaire class to do very much for black people. If we're going to be rescued and saved, the black middle class is going to have to come together and do this. I mean, unfortunately, most of our wealthy blacks tend to focus more on their bling and their lifestyle and uplifting themselves. And too many of us are so proud and happy about what Beyonce and Jay-Z have or how much money Kevin Hart has, rather than focus on what we don't have and what we should be doing to generate wealth ourselves.
And the other thing, Jimmy, debt is a crippling point for a lot of folks within our community because one is that our households are indexed at, I don't know, maybe a 60 to 70-ish% household income compared to, well, I don't know, Asians who are at the top of the food chain economically. It might be even lower than that 60 to 70% because I believe the last time we looked at this last year, average household income in Black America is about 50 grand. Well, no.
It was 40.
It was closer to 40 grand.
Yes.
Average household income in the Asian community is about close to 100 grand.
Yes. And I was surprised because I thought the number was going to be around 80 till you showed me the numbers. And Tom, they have done this and they've been very quiet about it. They don't boast. They don't go out there pounding their chest. They don't make a lot of noise about it. They have quietly become the number one group in America. And this is something that we need to borrow a page from their book. So stop comparing ourselves to white people and how much we are compared to them, because they are not at the top of the food chain in America anymore.
So the other thing that we have to add to this, one of the reasons that we did point out in a prior show is that Asian Americans have the highest per capita income is because they are the most likely to be business owners and entrepreneurs than
Yes,
any other demographic group in America. I want to say it was 1 out of every 10. And so as a result of that, not only are they making more money, but you know what? Business owners also get tax advantages that employees do not. And so as a result, they're able to keep more of their wealth. And in addition to that, Jimmy, they do business with each other. We talked about this recently. As a community, we have to start consuming what we control. Period.
correct.
Only. And so that is the only way to build your own economy and to build more wealth in your community. We also have a note here from Bosie Scott. Perhaps the students who no longer have loans will now have the ability to give back, but will they? The question is, paying off your loans, the average student, I believe, comes out with about $30,000 in student loans. And we're not talking about kids going into law school, kids going into
Graduate school, yes,
that's a whole different ball game.
correct.
But I think the average student comes out with $30,000. And so they are handcuffed by that for how many years until they can start putting money into their own pocket. And given that in our community, Jimmy, we are the least likely to be able to provide a financial legacy, which is what we call intergenerational wealth, Jimmy, that is how we get behind so fast as well. So with that being said, Jimmy, we want to thank you for these great comments. I think there is one last
From Mackie, yes.
interesting. NBA Hall of Famer Michael Jordan donated $10 million to make a Wish Foundation. Yet Netflix CEO Reed Hastings donated $120 million to the UNCF and Morehouse College and Spelman College as well.
And Tom, this is a little known secret, but it probably should be a bit of an embarrassment for us. I'm not sure if the Mr. Reed there, Hastings, is, I'm pretty sure he's probably a white person, but white Jews in America donate more money to our schools and scholarship funds than we do. And
Really? Now, where did we
yes,
find this information? That's interesting. I wasn't aware of that.
I ran across that. I'll see if I can go back and find the article or the reference to it. But yes, white Jews give more money to our scholarship funds than we do. So, and the fact that, the CEO of Netflix has donated $120 million when Jordan gives $10 million, not to UNCF or any black college or university, HBCU, but to the Make-A-Wish Foundation, which is a good foundation, don't get me wrong. But I'm pretty sure that I'll be willing to bet, I don't know this, I haven't seen the bottom line, the balance sheet, but I'll be willing to bet that the endowment fund for Make-A-Wish Foundation is probably larger than all of the black HBCUs endowment funds put together.
Yeah, that is a very good point, Jimmy. Let's continue to move forward. We were talking about the NFL and its hiring of black coaches. Depending on who you talk to, at one point in time, I know that about 70% of the black players in the NFL were black. I was looking at an article recently that said most close to 60. But either way, what we do know for sure that is a fact is there are only 3 black head coaches in the NFL. Obviously, one we just recently mentioned. And the situation is this, Jimmy. I think we're all very clear. It doesn't particularly have to do with your pedigree and or your qualifications. So, for instance, Jonathan Gannon, who was the former defensive coordinator of the Philadelphia Eagles, who were also in the Super Bowl, ended up getting a head coaching job with the Arizona Cardinals. Defensive coordinator, head coach of the Arizona Cardinals. We know that the Arizona Cardinals have a stout defense, but really their firepower is on offense. So they hire a defensive coordinator as their head coach. And we understand that one of the reasons that their former head coach got fired is because of the relationship with their franchise quarterback, Kyler Murray. That's another story for another time. But the offensive coordinator for the winning team of the Super Bowl, the Kansas City Chiefs, no offers for a head coaching job. I believe he is now interviewing for the offensive coordinator job for the Washington Commanders.
Well, Tom, going back to the Cardinals hire, the Eagles did have the number one defense in the league. So, I guess if you're going to take a chance on hiring a coach who has a proven track record, and you go with the ones who had the most success. So but the downfall of the Cardinals this year, there was a bit of a drop off, was basically the franchise quarterback getting hurt.
Well, part of that was the reason, Jimmy, but I would say this. The narrative is you have coaches who are sometimes mediocre at best, who get opportunities after opportunities for head coaching jobs. Again, Frank Reich, hired as the head coach of the Carolina Panthers, just got fired from the Indianapolis Colts. And I guarantee you that their former starting quarterback and their backup quarterback, one obviously a seasoned vet, the other one, I don't know if he is the caliber Carson Wentz. I don't know if he'll be starting for anybody anytime soon, as he's been kind of been passed around from team to team. But this coach, who is an offensive-minded coach, former quarterback, got hired by the Panthers when the interim coach, who actually had them on the precipice of a playoff.
Almost, which is a weird way.
After
could have made the playoffs, yes.
After, Jimmy, they ended up trading their best player, Christian McCaffrey.
Oh, they emptied the team, Tom.
And he doesn't get a real shot after he really built that team and had them on a playoff run after their best players were gone.
Yeah, you trade away your best players for draft picks and get rid of salary slots, and so you pretty much left the coach with a crippled team that he did absolutely the best job he could have. And certainly I would have put him in the running for Coach of the Year for the amount of results that you produce based on the talent, the lack of talent that you had. So, but Tom, the other team owners don't see it the way we see it. General managers don't see it the way we see it. So,
well, this is the way I see it. The reason that there are not a more equitable number of black head coaches in the NFL, given that this is a sport overwhelmingly dominated by African-American players for 3 generations now, Jimmy, is because owners don't want more black head coaches. There is no other reason that there are not more black head coaches, period.
Well, Tom, that is true. Certainly the hiring practices reflect the attitudes of owners. So, but with that being said, these are their teams. This is a very small 32 or 31 men who own these teams, billionaires.
32 and one woman.
And one woman.
Yeah.
30 and one woman and one publicly owned team in Green Bay.
You're right. You're correct.
So, but
I believe, Jimmy, the owner of the Panthers, is Middle Eastern, isn't he? I know one of the teams, their coach is Middle Eastern.
Okay.
I want to say it was the Canada. And then, of course, Chicago Bears the owner is a woman. But with that being said, Jimmy, we have about a minute until the top of the hour. I do want to acknowledge Marion Square, who just joined us as well. Thank you for joining us. She has one comment: when you donate to a nonprofit or charity, if I'm correct, they only have to give 5% of the money.
That's right. The other money could be in kind of gifts. It could be equipment. It could be a lifetime membership to Netflix, and how would they value that? So she's right. A lot of times these large numbers that are thrown out, it's not always cash. But
right.
you know whose gift was cash? Bill Cosby.
Yep. And when you do things that help our community, Jimmy, unfortunately there are consequences.
Yes. Not to justify anything that Bill did, but you're definitely right.
Whether it's Bill Cosby, or if we're talking about Robert Smith, again, after he paid off the debt of those college students, then they came attacking him as well. That's what happened.
Right. You get a target on your back when you try to do anything positive. which is why we have to stick together and persevere despite the opposition that we encounter.
Jimmy, before we close out our show, I want to make sure that we pay homage and honor someone who is now with our ancestors. It is a former assistant coach. Jimmy, I was not aware of this. Paul Gerard, who was a former National Hockey League player
Right.
and coach, formerly with the Minnesota North Stars as a player, coached with the Dallas Stars, also coached with the Colorado Avalanche, is it?
Avalanche. Yeah, I don't remember him with the North Stars. I didn't really follow hockey when they were in Minnesota.
Yeah, the Colorado. There you go, the Colorado Avalanche. And Jimmy just died after a battle with cancer at the tender age of 57.
I do remember him when he came to Dallas. Yeah, our prayers go out to the family. It's a pretty young age time to be kicking the bucket. So that just goes to show that life is precious. So live yours and get the absolute most out of life. Live each day as if it was your last.
Yes, Jimmy. So we have run out of time, Jimmy. We want to thank everyone who has joined us this evening. We have had a fun show. And also, Jimmy, we know that if it's Wednesday night,
it's certainly Black Man Speak. And we hope to see everyone next week.
Thank you, everyone, and good night.
Good night.